everyone, to The Rift. I am your host, Jeremy Culver, aka Darsay, and welcome to another episode here. Kyle is not here for this week. We just could not link up with his work schedule, so that happens sometimes. So this week, you get all of this beautiful face. So last week, of course, kicked off the LCS and LEC seasons in Season 1, and there were a lot of great things that took place and a lot of awesome matches that went down. But there are some things that we do need to talk about, and also about a league that we normally don't talk about here on the podcast, which is the LPL, and with what's going on over in China. So without further ado, we'll get into those things. And first, let's just talk a little bit about the viewership numbers that took place over this past weekend. So yes, of course, the LCS and LEC kicked off, and there were a lot of people excited to start the season. It's typical when it comes to any kind of season, whether it's the NBA, the NFL, the MLB. Opening weekend usually has a lot of people excited and ready to watch, and that actually held to be true. So according to .esports, when it came to viewership numbers for the LCS and LEC over the weekend on Twitch, now I'm just talking about Twitch for a second, the LCS had a much higher peak viewership number than the LEC, with a peak viewership of the LCS at 214,000, a little bit over that, of course. And for the LEC, it was just under 127,000. But, of course, that's not the only place that you can watch these games. You can watch them on other streaming platforms, including YouTube. And so when you combine those numbers together, the LCS was still a little bit higher, but not as much, with the peak viewership being 366,000, about 367,000 actually, and the LEC was about 306,000. So about 60,000 more people watched the LCS than the LEC, which is interesting to note because, of course, you know, you think about with the LEC, when the matches are going on here in North America, it is way late in the night, and so you don't see a lot of people watching, I would expect, those matches in North America from the LEC. You might have some of those people who do, that are night owls or stay up late normally, or who really just love League of Legends and want to watch it. But when it comes to just big fans of the LEC, they're going to be going to sleep. And LCS, you have more potential for them to watch because it is early in the morning. I know the first games start here in Wisconsin at 11 a.m. So, of course, over on the East Coast, it is noon, and over on the West Coast, it is 9 a.m. So that's not too bad for people to wake up early on a Sunday, or excuse me, on a Friday or Saturday to go watch these games, but obviously, that didn't pan out when it comes to the LEC. That doesn't, of course, mean that the LEC is bad by any measures. We already know that the LEC is great when it comes to the gameplay and the matchups and who we're going to see when it comes to the talent pool that EU brings. But the LCS just had the edge this week. We'll see what it will be like as weeks continue, because again, as I said, opening weekend, it's typical to see numbers higher. When you don't see typically is those numbers maintaining as the season goes on, because people start to either get busy so they don't watch as often, or you start to see a big pool between or a big gap between the top teams and the lower teams, and sometimes it can even be the top team to the second team. There can be such a big gap that some fans just start to tune out for a little while until it gets to playoffs, when the stakes are bigger, or tournaments when stakes are bigger and the competition level is also higher and the matches start to become more closer. The longest match, of course, of the weekend was TSM versus Immortals, going over an hour long. Most matches were shorter than that, of course, and some of them were fairly quick. I think there was a couple of them that lasted just over 20 minutes. Not atypical when it comes to the different game strategies that each team's going to bring to the table. But, of course, that is interesting to note, again, what that pulled. And of course, for the peak viewership for the LCS, that game, TSM versus Immortals, that went over an hour long, was the game that was the most watched. The second highest watched match was the Team Liquid versus Cloud9, which of course kicked off the weekend, or for the LCS, I should say. Again, not surprising, a lot of people being hyped for that first match. And of course, this is two juggernaut teams, two high fan base numbers, wanting to see where their team is going to reside when it comes to the overall season. Now, of course, Team Liquid did not have their full team there because Broxa is still facing visa issues, but they did get Schernfire in there, who they had only practice, it said, I think it was 3 days before that game took place, and Cloud9 looked really strong in that matchup. So even with that being said, and I will discuss that match just a little bit here in a short time, but fans didn't let that slide. They watched. They tuned in. They didn't tune out just because Team Liquid didn't have their full roster. That says a lot, because even though it is the opening match and the opening game of the weekend for the LCS, people weren't going to skip that match to watch other matches. They tuned in for that specific one, and that's really awesome to see. And I would say, if you're looking at viewership numbers, of course, for pro sports of things like the NFL, the NBA, and stuff, 366,000 people is not a huge number, but that is a lot for a video game league that is also, celebrating 10 years. The LCS, as we've discussed in the previous episode, or the leagues, I should say, has not been around for 10 years. But the game itself has been around for 10 years. So 366,000 people, that's a lot of people tuning in to watch these matches. So that's awesome to see, awesome to hear. Again, let's see how things go as the weeks roll out when it comes to those viewerships, and if they start to decline some. And of course, the most important is when playoffs come around, because that is when viewership should spike, should increase, and people want to watch more. So that'll also be a great thing to see in the future, how those things roll out and how these viewership numbers hold as the season rolls out. So let's talk about something, though, when it comes to a little bit of a different subject. Still League of Legends, of course, but not talking about viewership, actually about when viewers will be able to see it. So with the outbreak of the coronavirus in China, Riot Games has announced that they are indefinitely postponing the second week, or week 2, of the Chinese Pro League, the LPL. They wrote on Twitter, quote, "We have decided to postpone week 2 of the LPL until we can ensure the safety and health of our players and fans. The LPL wrote to our fans, we sincerely apologize that it has come to this, and we will share any and all information as soon as we can. Stay safe, and thank you all for your support." So it's important to note right now, as of this recording this video, no matches have been missed. Week 2 will be postponed. We already know that. But no matches have been missed. And sorry about that. That was my phone going off. The LPL had their week 1. And then they took a break because of the Chinese New Year, the Lunar New Year. And if you celebrate it like I do because of my family and my wife, happy Lunar New Year for you. I hope you had a great celebration. I know the saying, I just don't remember how to say Happy New Year, so I'll just do that. Happy Lunar New Year. I hope you guys had a good time. They took a break because of that, and so it's supposed to return on February 5th. But we already know that's going to be postponed because this coronavirus has really gone into an epidemic, as the CDC would report, when it comes to the number of cases in a short time frame. I used to be a former TV journalist and anchor, so of course We used to report on epidemics, and that's just the simplest answer for you guys to understand. If you don't know the details on when it is labeled an epidemic, it's just the number of cases that come up in a short time frame. So far, and again, these numbers are a little dated because this article was written back 4 days ago, but this is just to give you guys an idea of just kind of how things are going. There's been 2,000 Chinese citizens that have been diagnosed or affected by the coronavirus, and so far over 50 people have been killed. And there has been more cases popping up across the world, not just in the Asian countries. You have some cases, saying here in France and Australia, and if you've been following the news, even in America here, there has been cases that are going on. First, let me start with, I hope all who are affected by this virus, this epidemic, are safe and are going to be okay and will get better soon. And hopefully this epidemic will go away at some point. So, this is a cousin of the SARS virus, which is, of course, that had issues before. And again, let's just say that. Let's make sure that we keep that in our thoughts. The second thing that I want to say is, this, kind of showing, yes, it started in China and it's spreading, but this is an issue, and you have to make sure that as fan bases, we understand that there may be delays. And I referenced that because I just wanted to say with the Overwatch League, there has been, of course, the stopping of playing matches in Overwatch League in China. So they've canceled those, and they're going to be playing, I think, in North America for the time being. And there was a lot of fan outrage over that, and how some fans had to, or some teams even had to relocate their team from practicing because of the coronavirus. And there was a lot of fan outrage. I haven't seen that for the LPL just yet. There could be that, but just using that as an instance, we have to remember, even though we really enjoy these matches, these things that are going on, and the competitions that happen, these are all humans. These are all people who need to think of their safety and not just performing for fans to watch. And with that being said, you have to understand that these things are going to happen, especially when there's an epidemic like this. If you are outraged at all by the delay of the LPL or the canceling of games, take a second to think about why that should be. Not accusing anyone of that, but just want to make sure that you keep that in mind, because, again, player safety and the health of these people is way more important than any match. With that being said, this delay could have an impact on the rest of the leagues when it comes to mid-season tournaments, MSI, for instance, and then, of course, the rolling out in the Summer League, potentially falling all the way into Worlds. Because if the LPL doesn't have their matches, either those games are going to just be outright canceled, which they're not yet. They're just indefinitely suspended. So that means that at some point the plan is to actually have week 2. But the longer this goes on, the more that Riot will possibly have to cancel it. And if they cancel those games, those are, of course, lost potentials for wins and losses and helping separate the top teams from the bottom teams. And there could be that impact of a team who maybe is not as strong getting into the playoffs or getting into a MSI world slot because they had the benefit of skipping some matches against some stronger teams. And we always see that there can be the crazy playoff runs that happen. And so, like, even if a crazy playoff run happens and somebody wins a best of 3, that doesn't always necessarily mean that they're the better team. So just looking at that how much could this impact things when it comes to the standings going into the tournament, as well as for, again, MSI Summer League, as well as Worlds. We don't know these things yet. Riot has not commented on these things to say if they will impact things, because I think a lot of it right now just hinges on how long these week 2 matches will be delayed. But that is something that we really will need to pay attention to as it goes on, because again, even though we don't talk about the LPL very much here on the podcast, we very rarely do, actually, usually only around MSI and Worlds. This could have some kind of snowball effect to the LEC, to the LCS, and those competitions that we all watch and enjoy, the longer that this drags on. So hopefully, again, that this can get resolved soon, and the LPL can get their matches going shortly. Again, they were supposed to return on February 5th. We know that is delayed now. So at least once comes February 5th, they will be pushed back. But again, hopefully the coronavirus gets contained and gets better, and the epidemic stops, and those people can get healthy, and then we can, of course, go back to just focusing on the matches themselves and the leagues and the player matchups and things of that nature, because that is what we all want to do. That's why we watch these things. We want to enjoy those things, and we try to use these things as a way to separate real life from the matches, just like any fan does with the NBA, the NFL, the MLB, soccer, whatever it is. You don't want to think about the real world for that time being. You want to think about the league. So hopefully we can get back to that at some point. But it is important to note as well that the LCK is being impacted by it as well. They have been considering postponing the start of the LCK because of this epidemic spreading. So again, this article came out 2 days ago. And in this, basically Riot Korea said, "We're carefully monitoring the current situation and are considering measures so that the tournament can be held safely. In case of any changes, we will notify immediately." Then they also said that it wouldn't immediately affect the launch of the LCK, but they are postponing the media day. I do know that came out yesterday. Essentially, normally in Riot in Korea, they hold a media day with fans and the players and stuff, and they've already announced that they won't be having the media day as a precaution to protect players, visitors, athletes, things of that nature, and the officials. And also that right now there will be no audience for the LCK to just, again, be a safety measure. So it sounds like for the LCK, at least, they're going to have their matches currently, but is that they're just not going to have an audience for the time being. So again, it's a creative way trying to make sure these games go on, because they, again, do have an impact over the course of the full season. But it's going to be weird for these players. I definitely think when you look at the end of the day, when the players go on stage, a lot of the players feed off of that audience and that sound and what's going on, and it's going to be quiet in there. And so even the big plays, if you're listening to the broadcast, you're not going to hear the fans cheering off of a big match. Like, you'll have the announcers still, like, getting into it. That's what their announcers are supposed to do. The shoutcasters are supposed to give the energy to the viewer on what's going on and why a play is impactful and what happened in that play. Even if you're a casual fan, they're supposed to help, their tone of voice and their the way that they explain what's going on is supposed to convey to you, oh, this is like a great thing that happened. I should get excited for this. I should be excited because of how they act. Well, you're not going to have the fans to help that situation. So yeah, we'll see when they lift that and start being able to allow fans to get in to these matches. Now, I will say, just going off of this, it says here that the situation is less dire in South Korea, it sounds like, because it says despite only 4 cases in South Korea since January 20th, the government said that it'd go all out to contain the virus. And the government raised the infectious disease alert to orange, which is the third highest level, and monitored 28 potential cases. So again, that is, the measures that the South Korean government is doing to make sure everyone is safe, and that is what Korea is going to be doing to make sure the LCK goes off safe. That will launch on February 5th as planned, and again, just so that it's aware, it's without a live audience. So, talked about all that stuff. Now it's important to start talking about how the games went on week 1 for the LCS. So first off, I want to start with, we were wrong. We were wrong about Dignitas. Dignitas came out firing in week 1, and that was very shocking to me. I know, talking with Kyle, again, he was not able to do the podcast, but he was shocked as well. This team is probably better than we originally gave credit for. I did say that I thought that they were great players, but I kind of thought all of them were past their prime, and that they wouldn't perform as well because of that reason. Well, they obviously killed it. They started off 2-0, taking out CLG as well as Evil Geniuses to start their week 2-0. And a lot of it feels like it's because the meta works so well for these players right now. I mean, you look at Froggen. Froggen has been pretty much an afterthought for the last few seasons. And that's not a knock against him. It's just, it's the truth. Of course, that's why he wasn't on Echo Fox anymore. They removed him. That's why he wasn't with the team for a little while, because people just thought he was past his prime. He was done. He wasn't good enough to hold up in the league. And currently he's playing like the old Froggen, the Froggen that Kyle became a huge fan of course, that I became a fan of. I was never as big of a fan as Kyle was, but still I was a fan of Froggen. He's playing like the Froggen of old, and that works because the champions that he plays, are what works at the moment, and are what does well in this team comp. Huni is doing great, playing in the top lane, and of course we already knew that. Huni is a strong top laner. I still think that he's not as good as he once was, but he's still really good. And maybe this team is giving him as well like a renewed energy, a renewed fire to reclaim that moniker of best top lane. And I don't think just in NA. Like, he's just trying to become one of those best top laners. Aframu played really well in the bot lane. When you think about Johnson, he played fairly well, and I think that helps when you have such a veteran voice and somebody who's been around for so long in Aframu. And then in jungle, like, Grig didn't do too bad. I still think Grig is not as good as Acadian, and I would prefer Acadian in the jungle, but maybe it's because of like Grig seems to play better as like the supporting jungler than Acadian, where Acadian is more of the carry aggressive jungler. That may be why that they have him in this lineup over Acadian, but I think that Dignitas looks really strong, and if they keep if the meta doesn't shift too much, and they keep playing the way that they played in at least week 1, and there's always going to be stumbles, I could definitely see them pushing top 4. This team, the way they played week 1, is so different compared to what I thought. What I thought was going to happen with this team, and that's awesome to see, because Dignitas, such a long-standing organization when it comes to the foundation, the beginning of the LCS, to have them do this on their first week back is amazing. I also want to say that I'm wrong, or that we were wrong, because CLG did not look as good as Kyle and I thought. And we discussed this heading into recording of this podcast. I talked with him a little bit, and he said, in his words, that CLG looked like they were the worst team in the league. And that I can't argue with. I thought they were really bad. I even thought that Golden Guardians played better than CLG did in these matchups. Now, granted, let me say CLG went up against Dignitas, who's 2-0, and I just talked about how well they played and how good they looked, and FlyQuest, who is also 2-0, also played really well. I thought that they would win one of those. And, of course, I thought it was going to at least be the Dignitas game. That wasn't the case. They played very bad. Some of it could be because of the fact that Crown, who was tied up with visa issues, was able to finally get in and play. So the team hasn't had a ton of time to play together. But Wiggly looked awful. For a guy who was the shining spot, the bright moment for this team last split, he looked really bad. Stixay and Smoothie seemed like they could not get any rhythm going against any of the teams. And that is, of course, not going to be any way that you're going to be able to carry any kind of momentum and win against any team, even Golden Guardians. Golden Guardians at least have a bright spot with Closer. Closer was so good in the jungle spot. I know that the analysts really praised him, and I was praising him too watching those games. But the team in Golden Guardians doesn't have much expectations. So that was nice to see. CLG, on the other hand, had higher expectations. They were expected to be a much different team and felt like that with the pickup of Crown, with Ruin in the top lane, and the pickup of Smoothie, that this team might finally have figured it out and got a great roster to move forward and fight and compete against some of these other teams. And that just was not the case. They were rough. Going to the LEC, a lot of it, in my opinion, shaped out how we thought. Of course, Origin started off 2-0, Rogue started off 2-0, G2 started off 2-0. We all expected those to happen, or them be strong teams. Of course, the match against Origin and Fnatic, I know that I think, if I remember correctly, both Kyle and I picked Fnatic to win that matchup. But we both said, because of how strong we thought Origin's roster was, that we wouldn't be surprised if Fnatic lost. But we thought that Fnatic might be the more complete team currently because of the time spent with each other and the coordination that that team may have. Well, Origin is obviously really strong right now and has the synergy that you're looking for with this team. And I think that is great to see. And I can't wait to see how the matchup goes between Origin and G2. So spoiler alert, that is one of my picks when it comes to matches to watch. So I'm going to be talking about that in a little bit. But I'm looking forward to that matchup. The one team, though, that I am a little surprised was not able to pull off at least a victory. I thought they would win, and they didn't, is Shulk. I thought Shulk would beat Excel. I said that I thought Excel was a good team, but I thought that Shulk was better currently, and I thought that they do have better players with Abadage, Forgiven, Otawame. Of course, I said the only one that I really don't like on Shulk's team is God Gilius. But Excel took the win, and obviously that's a great thing for Excel with the pickups they have and having Young Buck as their coach. we talked about how that could strategize and be great for them. And I'm a fan of Cadril. I thought Cadril did well this weekend as well, so that's awesome to see. But Shulk didn't get a win, and that's the only thing that was surprising to me, in my opinion. I thought everything else played out how it should. And, you know, there is some exciting matchups, in my opinion, for week 2 of the LEC. So I will say, when it comes to overall matches between LEC and the LCS in week 2, LEC is can't miss. You got to watch those ones. LCS, there's, of course, some good matches, some matches that I'm looking forward to. And that's, of course, of just being a fan. But if you had to, you didn't have enough time to watch all the matches for both LCS and LEC, and you were like, Jeremy, which league should I watch this week? LEC, by far. Watch those ones, because there is a lot of great matchups, and we're going to get into that in just 1 second. But I do want to talk about one guy in particular, and if you allow me a second to get everything in order, I just want to talk about the Mad Lions ADC, Darsay, because, man, did he play really well this weekend. So, looking at his stats, now keep in mind, in the first game, they went up against G2. You don't expect them to win that game. And they were up. They had some times where they kind of put G2 in a spot. But overall, G2 was going to win that game, and we knew that was going to happen, and they did. They won, and G2 won in 34 minutes. But Darsay had a final score of 7-6-2, which is not great, but not terrible. You know, this is one of those matches that the score doesn't look that great because his KDA was a 1.5, but just the way that he played it, the way that he went up against, of course, Caps doing a lane swap, and he's a rookie. Man, it was awesome to watch. And then you turn around and see him go against Vitality, which I will say currently they look like one of the worst teams in the league. Goes 6-1-4 on Misfortune, and again looked really good. Had a KDA, of course, of 10. He is a shining spot that I think that you need to watch out for as the week rolls on, or as the weeks roll on. How he plays is going to be really definitive, in my opinion, of the success of Mad Lions. And I think he is a player to watch. Could be the rookie of the split at the end of the season if, again, he keeps playing how he is. Because week 1, it's always a crapshoot. Week 1 can change so dramatically for each team. A team could come out of the gates 2-0 and lose every other game the rest of the season. It happens. We've seen it happen. But I think Darsay, he looks really strong so early on in his career, and against a good team in G2 that, again, I currently would crown him my rookie of the split for the LEC. Playing really great, and currently, if I had to go for the LCS, I would say probably I would go with Closer on Golden Guardians. I think he played really, really strong for again, a Golden Guardians team that has no expectations, and played well. So now it's time to go and break down, or pick, I should say, my games to watch when it comes to the weekend. Now, of course, Kyle is not here, so we're only going to be picking one game for each week, or each day, I should say, for each league. So, one for the LEC on Saturday, one for the LEC on Friday, one for the LCS on Saturday, one for the Sunday, and one for Monday. And, of course, on on Friday, I am going to go with probably, the most thought of matchup because of the fact of where they sit currently in the league. And that is going to be the opening game against Origin and Rogue. So Origin and Rogue currently are sitting at 2-0. And we talked about it before in again, the LEC breakdown episode, as well as kicking off the week for the LEC and LCS in our last episode. But I really like the Rogue roster. I really think this is a great team. And this definitely will be the matchup to show if they're serious contenders or if they are average. The reason being, of course, is Rogue. They went up against two weaker teams, Misfits as well as Excel Esports, or at least weaker teams in my opinion. That's an easy way to go 2-0. Origin, however, had to go up against Fnatic and then Shulk, which again, Shulk didn't look very strong. But Fnatic, of course, is definitely a top 4 team in the LEC. That is a harder road to go 2-0. And this roster of Origin already or definitely looks like it is a top 3 team. Rogue could be. And Hansama played really well. Looked more back to form. Back to the old Misfits Hansama. But now they have a tough matchup. Now they actually have a strong competition match that people will be actually going into with expectations of that they could lose. I would not be surprised if I see a lot of people say Origin will win this game. Because again, this lineup, this roster is made to win. This roster is made to compete against G2, the giants of the LEC, the kings of the LEC. And when you have that title, you're expected to basically win every game except maybe against G2, which is, again, until you prove that you can beat them, you're not going to get a lot of support over them. I would not be surprised if Rogue wins this, simply because I do think that this roster, again, is really good. And I think just the biggest factor, the biggest point for this team is that they just have some players on here who are still not fully sure how good they're going to be, or that they were average on other teams. The only one that I think brings a lot of support behind them as like a top tier player is Hansama. I think Vander has always been seen as a good support, not great. Larson, of course, has had moments where he looks really good, but then, of course, how he faltered in the last split, a lot of people see him as a flip-floppy character. Again, good, not great. Finn, kind of unknown. Inspired, kind of unknown. So their roster is a lot of question marks still, even though, again, I still think that this is a really strong roster. While Origin, you have Nukeduck, of course, seen as a good, kind of great mid laner, depending on what you get from him. Darsay, great jungler. Upset, great ADC. In the bot lane, you have Destiny. Seen as a good, maybe not great. And for me, I know that Alfari, a lot of people see him as like a top laner. I will still say I don't think he's that good, but he played really well last week. So if I'm going to give any edge, I'm definitely giving it to Origin. I think Origin wins this. But what I expect from this overall matchup is close, is something that is going to be decided by maybe a fight around the Drake or around Baron, and not like a Baron throw, just a fight around it that will lead to either one, like whichever the team either gets the Baron buff that ends up winning them the game, like they can push down the lanes, or they get the execution spirit from the Drake, and that's going to end up helping them win the other team fights that end up winning the game. So I do give Origin the win on that, but I do think, again, even though it is the first game of Friday or tomorrow, it is definitely probably one of the best. For Saturday, when it comes to the EU, even though I just talked about Origin, it has to be the end of the day G2 versus Origin. Again, this roster in Origin was built to compete against G2, to possibly win against G2. But as I already said, until you do it, you're not going to get a lot of credit. And G2 continues to show that they are the kings of EU. And I don't see anything changing at the moment. I don't see G2 faltering in this matchup. So I'll tell you right now, I already think they're going to win. I do think it's going to be close, though. And the reason I think it's going to be close is because I do think eventually Origin may pull out a win against G2, and it could be later in the split when they meet up against each other again. But currently, this team is just so strong, so good that G2, it's hard to go against them. I will firmly tell you, until someone beats G2, I don't see me voting against G2 if someone says, like, who's going to win this matchup. G2 is just so strong, and that's why that match is going to be great. And I believe it's going to be close. I hope it's going to be close. I hope that Origin is as good as a roster I think they are, and a roster that I think Origin believes it to be. I want more competition for G2. I want to be able to watch a G2 matchup and feel like I don't know if they're actually going to win, because most of the time you just turn on the matchup and you're like, they're winning, and it's easy. But yeah, so that's my matchup for Saturday for LEC. For the LCS on Saturday, I'm going to go with the matchup that probably a lot of people wouldn't see as like the matchup to look at, but I feel, or I believe, the reason it is a matchup that I want to see is just because it will help me with understanding where these two teams sit, and that is actually Golden Guardians versus Evil Geniuses. So Evil Geniuses started the season 1-1, and Golden Guardians, of course, 0-2, but as I said, Golden Guardians actually looked a lot stronger than I expected, and a lot of that I will credit again to Closer. He played very well in the jungle spot. But a lot of it just comes down to which carry is going to step up for Golden Guardians and be that person, that go-to that can help them take over games to win. FBI didn't really do it. Golden Glue, didn't really do it. But I think Golden Glue has the better potential, and I know Kyle would like be screaming in his microphone right now if he was here, and I'm sure when he listens to this later, he's going to say the same thing. He's going to scream at me because he doesn't like Golden Glue. But I think Golden Glue has the potential to be that second focus. I just think a lot of it right now is confidence and feeling like the synergy is there for this team. Right now, while Closer plays really well, my thoughts of the matchups that go on is Golden Guardians seemed really afraid to pull the trigger, besides Closer. Closer was like the only one that was kind of looked like he could pull the trigger to force a fight and win. Everyone else was not really there. And that could inherently never come for a lot of players, for a lot of Golden Guardians. But Golden Glue or FBI has to step up. Haunter is really good in the top lane. I still like Haunter in the top lane, but he's never going to be your carry. He, again, is kind of like a rock, and I think is like one of those guys in the top lane that can keep things from snowballing out of favor, but you definitely got to have somebody else step up in FBI or Golden Glue. And for Evil Geniuses, they looked good in their win, and they, of course, looked fairly good, I would say, in the loss against Team Liquid. Or, excuse me, against Dignitas. They looked good. They looked good in their win against 100 Thieves. I thought they didn't look too bad against Evil Geniuses. I don't know why I said Team Liquid. They looked fairly good, but I just still am not for sure about this team and where it stands. And this is a matchup. If they're going to be a team that deserves consideration and contention for a higher spot, a top 4, as I look at it, even though, of course, 4th does not get you to Worlds, but just a top 4 spot, you got to handle the teams that are seen as weak. And, of course, a lot of people look at Golden Guardians as weak, me included. So Evil Geniuses need to come out and basically put their pedal to the metal and just roll through Golden Guardians. That will give you credibility. That will give you the justification that you may be looking for in who is actually considered as one of the top teams. And if Evil Geniuses want that, they have to do that. I think they win, but I personally think it's going to be close, just because I don't see Evil Geniuses as good of a team again yet. Maybe later on, but I just don't see them right now. For the second day, I'm actually going to go with Team Liquid versus FlyQuest. A lot of it has to do with, of course, we still have visa issues for Broxa, so Surenfire is going to be in the jungle role for Team Liquid. So where does that take Team Liquid? Are they going to be better now that they've had more than a week of practice with Surenfire and his tendencies in the jungle spot? Or does Team Liquid continue to not look as great just because of the fact that they don't have their main guy, the guy that they signed to actually play with the starting roster? And the other part is just I really liked watching FlyQuest's games. Viper killed it in the top lane, and just overall they played amazing. I will say, because I really liked Ignar, and we talked about it. They talked about it in the analyst that, Viper, when you get to Riven, like, it's just like, yeah, that's his character. We already know he's going to just, like, he's going to take over. And they talked about Ignar with Leona. While I see it, I'm still going to go with Blitzcrank is the Ignar guy. Like, I just see Ignar is Blitzcrank, not Leona. That's just my small pet peeve. But I really liked FlyQuest's team. I liked how they played. I liked that they started 2-0. Again, they had an easier schedule to go 2-0, but I still think that is a hype matchup, in my opinion, and I can't wait to see how it shapes out. And my fanboy may be showing in this, but I still think Team Liquid takes it. But I expect it to be close. The final game on Monday, and of course this is no secret, is going to be TSM versus CLG. This is going to just determine, in my opinion, which one is the better of the weaker teams currently. TSM did really well, actually, in both their games. Of course, they lost against Immortals in a matchup that I think was not too bad. And then against Team Liquid, I didn't think they played too bad as well. And the numbers actually show that they didn't do too bad either, because TSM actually has the highest goal differential at 15 minutes, which shows that they get the early leads. They just can't figure it out late. A lot of that could do with Bjergsen was sick this past weekend. So who knows how much that impacted them and the matchups. But I just think, like, CLG has to pull out a win this weekend. Like, they cannot start the season 0-4. But against going to, 100 Thieves as well as, TSM, there is that chance. There is that chance they go 0-4. TSM, actually, in their other matchup is against Evil Geniuses. So we'll see if they're heading into this matchup 0-3. But that would be crazy to head into this Monday matchup. Both TSM and CLG, basically the founding fathers of the LCS, at 0-3. That would be crazy. I think TSM wins this because I agree with what Kyle thought earlier about CLG looking like the weakest team. Based on the week 1 matchups, I thought that they were the weakest team. They just did not play well at all. There was just no point in any of their matches where I thought they could win this. They just played that badly. TSM, I actually thought, especially against Immortals, that they were going to win. So who knows? But I think TSM is going to take that one over CLG. So for me, again, those are the matchups for the weekend. So just to recap it, because I did talk for quite a while on those, you have Origin and Rogue in the first day, and then you have G2 against Origin in the second day. Golden Guardians against Evil Geniuses on the first day of the LCS. Team Liquid against FlyQuest day 2, and TSM versus CLG on day 3. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below about how you thought week 1 went, about the viewership numbers, the coronavirus delaying the LPL, as well as your matches of the week. And be sure to, again, give us your thoughts on how things are going. And if you guys leave a comment down below on this, then maybe we will feature it in our next podcast so that we are reading those, because we actually do read every single comment that is left on the videos. So, for the last time on this episode, my name is Jeremy Culver, aka Darsay, and I hope you guys all have a wonderful week watching this second week of the LCS and LEC. We will have Kyle back for next week's episode, but remember to always continue to come back here and listen to The Rift, as we will continue to bring you the news